until they have had opportunity to give the matter more careful study. The Prime Minister's announcement is all the more welcome to this House because of the reason he gave for it, namely that there appeared to be dissatisfaction in Newfoundland with the size of the amount recommended. This House declares its warm appreciation of the Prime Minister's stand and expresses the hope that it will result in a substantial increase in the size of the amount ultimately to be paid to this province on a lasting basis. In the meanwhile, we urgently request the Government of Canada to seek without delay the necessary parliamentary authority to pay to Newfoundland in the present session as an interim measure at least the amount that has been recommended by the Royal Commission. This would enable the public services and public works of the province to be continued this year without interruption or reduction, thereby preventing immediate widespread unemployment, and would provide ample time before the next session of Parliament for the Prime Minister and his colleagues in the Government of Canada to give that further study announced by the Prime Minister. I moved that resolution on the 3rd of September, and the Leader of the Opposition seconded the motion. It was put to the House and carried unanimously. And I telegraphed it, or perhaps I wrote it. At all events, I sent it forward to the Prime Minister. I have never had an answer to it to this moment. Has failed altogether to say that this is not just a sort of small part of what we're to get this year, but this is in fact all of what we ought to have had for the year before last, all of what we ought to have had for last year, and half of what is due us this year. Now, term 1, term 2, term 3, one says that on and from and after the coming into force of these terms, hereinafter referred to as the date of union, Newfoundland shall form part of Canada and shall be a province thereof, to be called and known as the province of Newfoundland. And then clause 2 says that the province of Newfoundland shall, that says what it is, where it is, shall comprise the same territory as at the date of union. 23, debt, a disposition of the public debt. 24, the financial surplus. 25, loans. 26, subsidies. All matters of cash, all matters of finance. Subsidies. 26, Canada will pay to the province of Newfoundland the following subsidies. And then follow the list of them, follows the list. And these are the ordinary Confederation grants that have been paid to all provinces since Confederation began in 1867. An annual subsidy of $180,000 and an annual subsidy equal to 80 cents per head of the population of the province of Newfoundland, which they took as being 325,000 until the first decennial census after the date of union. 80 cents a head. That's what all provinces in Canada get. They get 80 cents a head from the beginning of Confederation. That's the famous price of the sheepskin. The House will remember the reference in Nova Scotia. The anti-Confederates said when they despised this 80 cents a head, which was much more money then than it is now, they described it as selling your birthright for the price of a sheepskin. Evidently, that used to be about what a sheepskin would bring back in 1867. Oh, then another it's in two sections, 26's A and B. Then 27 comes, tax agreement. Canada had just a year or two before that, before we became a province, Canada had offered the other provinces to make a tax rental agreement under which the government of Canada would rent from the provinces the right to collect income tax and corporation tax, so that the people of those provinces would have to pay only one income tax, the one they would pay to the government of Canada, and they wouldn't have to pay an extra one to the government of their province, and they wouldn't have to pay an extra income tax to the municipality, which they were doing in some parts of Canada. Canada said, let's make an agreement. We'll collect the income tax and nobody else. We'll collect the corporation taxes from the big companies. And in return, we will pay you, each province, certain amount. Now, they had made that just before we became a province. And so in section 27, they give us the offer to enter into that same agreement for the remainder of the contract, if we wished to do so. As a matter of fact, we did wish to do so, and the first thing we did when we became a province and the House of Assembly was elected, one of the first things we did was pass an act here in this chamber authorizing the government to make that tax rental agreement with the government of Canada, and it has stood from that day to this. Then 28. You come to term 28. All this is financial. Term 28. In order, it says, in order to facilitate, to make it a little easier, in order to facilitate the adjustment of Newfoundland to the status of a province of Canada. The recognition was there. They couldn't help recognizing it. They'd have to be blind not to see that for Newfoundland to become adjusted. Stabbing. Newfoundland, while he was doing that, he argued that Newfoundland was not a sovereign dominion because Newfoundland had not adopted the Statute of Westminster. Now, he could be right. He could be right. I was in this chamber when the Statute of Westminster was debated, and the Prime Minister of that day, Sir Richard Squires, moved the House to pray the Queen, the King, not to make Newfoundland, not to adopt the Statute of Westminster, or acquainting the King that Newfoundland didn't want to adopt the Statute of Westminster. And that is true. And Mr. Brown could have been right when he argued that we had never become a full-fledged dominion in the strict constitutional sense of the word. But even if we were not a dominion, we were a country. We were a colony. We were a British. We were not a province of Canada. This was not the government of Canada making some kind of a deal with one of its provinces. This was a British country, far older than Canada herself. 3 times as old, 4 times as old, 5 times as old. We're 450 odd years old. Canada is only 90 years old. Here was a country, an ancient British country, the first British country in the whole world, outside of England, the first on earth, making a treaty, making a pact with another country, also a British country, that we thought was an honorable country, whose statesmen we thought were not only honorable, but would always be honorable men, who would honor Canada's signature, would always honor, not tear up contracts, not tear up a constitution. And here were these 2 British countries making a solemn agreement, making a pact. And Mr. Pearson says, here is a pact between 2 countries, in consequence of which the federal government, the Canadian government, undertook to do certain things. It undertook to set up a royal commission which would make recommendations as to how term 29 could be implemented in the way laid down in the pact. Then, without consultation of any kind, remember, the pact was made by consultation. The pact was made by negotiation lasting 6 months, first for 3 months, then a year later for 3 months again, between 8 appointed representatives of the National Convention, or 7 rather, and then 7 representatives appointed by the Commission of Government. And we negotiated, and we finally signed a pact It was bilateral, not unilateral, not just one side. It was not take it or leave it. It was two countries, the duly appointed representatives of two countries, two British countries. When the people of you see, Mr. Pearson has never been punished by Newfoundland, and so he has no particular desire to punish us. Mr. Pearson has no reason to punish Newfoundland. No reason. Mr. Pearson couldn't, if he sat down a week and did nothing else, couldn't even imagine any reason why he should want to punish Newfoundland. Mr. Pearson can't think of any reason. I can't think of any reason why Mr. Pearson would want to punish Newfoundland. Who has punished us? Mr. Diefenbaker, Mr. Brown, Mr. McGraw, all the members of the Tory party in the House of Commons, without exception. All of them have punished Newfoundland, have cut Newfoundland's throat, have stabbed Newfoundland in the back, have betrayed us.
We're dead now, aren't we?
We're not dead. It takes more than Diefenbaker to kill us. It takes more.
Cut her throat and stabbed her in the back. She's still alive. Brother.
We shall correct this violation of a contract, and we shall make sure once again that the Act of Union is honored in all its parts and is carried out as it must be carried out, in letter and in spirit. When the people of Newfoundland, he says, when the people of Newfoundland joined their destiny and linked their history and added their glorious and honored traditions to ours, to Canada's, they did not dream. When the people of Newfoundland did that, they did not dream that 10 years later, the government of the other party to the contract, the government of Canada, would impose on them a decision, a settlement, without consultation with them.
Well, there was an opposition in the House of Assembly in 1959. The leader, the aforementioned Malcolm Hollitt, who Joe Smallwood in the election of August 59 was to defeat in Hollitt's riding of St. John's West. Now, you will notice as we watch this last little bit of just a couple of minutes that the whole tone of the opposition. Hollitt rises to ask a question, but he barely gets it out of his mouth, and Smallwood is waiting to pounce. And then Hollitt says nothing else then. And I don't think that today, well, the tone of the House is different. And the leader of the government would not be able to get away quite so easily. But then this was 1959 and things were different. And Joe Smallwood was Premier of the province. Here's a little bit from the House of Assembly, beginning with Malcolm Hollitt.
Will the Premier given any thought to the fact that by 1962, $8 million will be small stuff compared to what we may get out of even a PC government?
I'm glad the leader of the opposition asked that question, because it reminds me to clear up something. The resolution to which I'm speaking if the Leader of the Opposition will turn to it. It's on page 2. No, if I beg the Honourable Gentleman's pardon, on page 1, term 5. Term 5 says what term 29 is, item 5 tells what term 29 is, and item 6 and 7 tell what term 29 is not. And then I want to go on to 8. Now let me read them. Term 29 provides for the continuation of Newfoundland's public services as they were found to be when the McNair Royal Commission made its report and recommendations.
Reading, I'm sorry.
5. Item 5. This continuation of the province's public services is to be paid for by the Government of Canada after the people of Newfoundland have borne to the Government of Newfoundland at least as great a burden of taxation, having regard to their capacity to pay, as the people do in the nearby maritime provinces. And this is to be done without qualification and without limit of time. Now that's what term 29 is.
You're watching NTV, Canada's leading superstation.
Well, it was a turbulent year, 1959, and two great events. The IWA strike and the Term 29 issue, and it's amazing when you reflect back on it, because at the moment of his greatest triumph, the election of 1959, in that same year, and he was swept back into power, but the first seeds after a decade in power, there were hundreds and hundreds of loggers in central Newfoundland who would never again vote for J.R. Smallwood, or their families for that matter. And it is arguable, not to say that it's fact, but it is arguable that it was the beginning of the end for Smallwood. Anyway, we have to go. It has been, well, I've enjoyed it anyway. Hope you have. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
News and information is all about teamwork here at NTV.
We've got you covered for all your weekend news.
Join us for the NTV Sunday Evening News Hour, your only live weekend newscast.
Trust NTV for weather you can always count on.
And we're the only place for noon hour news.
And we provide it earlier than any major newscast in Canada, coast to coast, on Canada's superstation, NTV.
They run down to the sea, living on your western shore. Saws their sunset as forlorn. I stood by your Atlantic sea and sang a song for Ireland, talking of the day with true friends to try and make you stay, telling jokes